He just called us dickheads.
I think you're hearing stuff, and it's good that people will be introduced on
You want me to
on
He just called me a dickhead. I can't believe that.
and on that note, I want to welcome everybody to the world, according to the cleanest show on earth, and that man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. This is the world according to Ben Stein. I want to welcome everybody that's in the chat room. I, of course, want to welcome the president of Conservative Talk Radio from 93.1, BAM! Conservative Talk Radio, Rob Kendall. How you doing, Rob?
It is an honor to be here with you, and of course, the one and only, the great, the legendary. Well, now do your intro for him, Judah, because you've got that all scripted out there, right?
Yeah, always. But of course, this show would be complete without actor, writer, provocateur, saint, sinner, lover, grandfather, father, mathematician, statistician, economist, former shoe salesman, but of course, America's doctor.
Doctor, yes. And by the way, I am now taking appointments for future psychiatric visits with people who are disturbed by the fascist hyenas running our country.
Yes, so that brings us to our first topic. We're going to be discussing a few things tonight. For the end of the show, we'll be talking about forgiveness. Ben and I both belong in the 12-step group, and it's imperative that we live by the standard of forgiveness and not building resentment. And it's extremely hard in today's world to not have resentment and to have forgiveness. So we're going to talk about that towards the end of the show, but I really want to get into right away this shocking thing that Breitbart is reporting. It's not shocking. We knew it was coming, but essentially the government is calling on neighbors to spy on neighbors. They're calling for us to surveil each other. And one of my favorite things about it is they said it's apolitical.
I want to ask the question. Who is they? Who
the Biden administration, and this was a Biden official.
Who is that, Ms. Psaki?
No, it's the whole administration, and this is a strategy. Let me quote: "This is a strategy that is agnostic as to political ideology or off the spectrum," the official said. What matters is when individuals.
Who's the official?
It's not naming the official. What matters is when individuals take their political or grievances and turn that unacceptably, unlawfully into violent action. Not to mention that every single act of violence last year was pretty much perpetrated by the left, by Antifa, by Black Lives Matter. People were calling the police and nothing happened. But I want to get to something before I get to you, Ben, because it's even more important about this topic. I was thinking about government, surveilling ourselves. The FBI can't even do surveillance. Okay, so I'm taking 5 cases right now, Rob and Ben. The FedEx shooting in Indianapolis, they interviewed him beforehand. Parkland shooting, they tipped, investigated, FBI did nothing. Boston bomber, Russia.
They investigated the Boston bombers?
Yes. Russia gave intel to the United States that they were radical Islam. They were part of a radical Islamic sect. Sandy Hook, the FBI went to their house to investigate this kid for hacking. What?
Never mind.
And of course, the Orlando shooter was under surveillance for 10 months. So I say to you, Ben Stein, we are in some frightening, freaking times.
Well, I think that the FBI has had problems with the efficiency of its operations for a time now. I think by and large they do an incredible job, but obviously the cases you described are great big mistakes on their part. But you are correct in saying the real problem is not that they missed these bombs, it's that they're inciting us to spy on our neighbors. That is a really, really bad situation for the United States of America to be in. This is not America if we are spending our time spying on our neighbors. It's just not America anymore. It's just somebody else. I don't know what it is. It's not America. It's I don't know. It's Bulgaria was an ally of Hitler's Germany. I don't know what it is exactly, but it is not what we expect at all from a modern free state under the Constitution.
Especially for people like us that talk out loud and do it in the written form. There's anybody that could say Ben Stein is trying to radicalize people.
Radicalize people. I'm not trying to radicalize people. I want some chocolate ice cream, some salted malted chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream right fucking now. And wait a minute, Glenn.
No ice cream during show. Messes up the audio. But
All
Rob,
right.
I go to you, Rob. You are an insider by their metrics. You are on the radio every day, speaking your mind, speaking the truth, and somebody could come and say, Rob Kendall from 93.1 WIBC with the great hair plugs is inciting tribalism, is inciting rhetoric, and they could go after you.
So two things. I can speak to the Indianapolis shooting at FedEx because obviously that was a huge story here. And what happened there is this dude was under investigation and he should have been prevented from having a weapon because of the red flag laws in the state of Indiana. The prosecutor in Marion County, which is Indianapolis, dropped the ball on it, basically didn't see it forward. And it was basically, they tried to dump it on, well, the courts were so backed up because of COVID and well, we just couldn't do this. This has happened so often in America. We don't need more laws. We don't need new laws. We just need to enforce the laws on the books. If the laws on the books had been enforced, that kid would have never had a gun and the FedEx thing wouldn't have happened.
And this happens over and over and over again. We do not see the law enforcement enforcing the law. This is standard in the United States of America, and they're always thinking of some excuse. Now, nowadays, I think the police can give a good excuse saying, if we go after anyone, the civil liberties groups are going to go after us and sue us and keep us tied up in court and make us worry that we're going to be the ones who are put in prison. They have that excuse. That's a darn good excuse. What is going to happen when the police are afraid to even touch their fingernails to the garment of the prisoners and the people under surveillance? And that's on its way.
And so the second part of that is this idea that justice is not being equally enforced. You think about somebody like the McCloskeys in St. Louis, who were literally defending their own property. Their subdivision was broken into. There were crazy people right outside their house pointing guns at them. So they go out and defend themselves, and then they get arrested. I mean, there's
incredible. Happens. And I'm sorry to say, my dear friend Rob, it's happening all over America. The police have been so subverted and tortured and tormented that they are afraid to enforce the law, and therefore the law gets not enforced, but turned against the law enforcers and turned in favor of the criminals.
And what this is sort of reminds me of is obviously the Tea Party. In that case, it was the IRS going after a movement. Now they're asking for Americans that live next door to you to go after you. It's an absolutely frightening thing because there's, what's that called again? Rob, you'll be more familiar with the term, not doxing, but when you report your neighbor has a crime and people have been arrested for this and the cops have gone to their house and actually shot people at the house. You report that there's criminal activity in a house. It's like swatting or something like that. And you're going to have a bunch of people reporting people to the police that have absolutely done nothing wrong. Ben, remember the other day you were saying eventually we're going to come to the point where it's going to be Jew in front of your name on your mailbox. It's going to be Republican.
It's going to be J, and then R. Yeah, I can see that happening right away. It's a scary thing. I mean, I live in a neighborhood that's very largely Jewish. It's very largely Republican. And I could see us being the victims of mob violence at any time. It's not a good situation at all. And if we try to buy guns to defend ourselves, well, we're in real trouble then. I mean, then Katie bar the door in terms of what's going to happen to us. I mean, I'll put it this way. I don't like the whole idea of neighbor being turned against neighbor. You should, if anyone in the audience of this show has not bought an incredible multi-disc set called The World at War about World War II, you must get it. It is about a day-by-day life, among many other things, day-by-day life in Nazi Germany. And of course, it was even worse in Stalin's Russia.
And I forgot,
nothing could happen without Stalin or Hitler seeing it or hearing about it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I forgot to add to that. So when the FBI, when the FBI needs to open a phone from the Apple, they have to go to court. They make it, obviously now we know it should be very hard to open up a phone, Rob, but now they're going for socials about rhetoric. And so essentially you're going to have a one-party system. I mean, on Facebook, on all social networks, it's going to truly be a one-party system, which begs the question, how come conservatives have not Roger Aired this market of social media? What is it about social media, Rob? And it's frightening what they're doing.
Well, before I get to that, Ben said something last time I was on, I guess that would have been Thursday, and I got to follow up with this. Did you say Bob Dylan is your neighbor?
He was my neighbor when I lived on Point Doom in Malibu, but now I've moved a little farther west in Malibu, so he's not my neighbor anymore.
Did you ever meet him? Did you ever hang out with Dylan?
Never did, but I did. I've seen him, but I've never hung out with him.
Okay. That was nothing. That was nothing about nothing.
Thank you, non sequitur fanboy. You are the James Corden of the Ben Stein show. Ultra fanboy. But Rob, social media, people are going to be scared. You're almost putting people in a box where they're basically saying to you, speak quietly.
Well, it's interesting. We talk about this all the time on the air. Facebook started as a way to pick up chicks, right? You had to have a college email. And it's fascinating, as somebody who was one of the early people on Facebook, how much it's evolved and the now importance of it and the power that it has. And it's scary that a select group of companies have such a consolidated group of power. And it is interesting on how slow conservatives have been. For years, they had this great forum in talk radio to disseminate their ideas, but rapidly social media has become this giant powerhouse, and we did not keep up.
Very scary stuff. And I don't know what you mean by we did not keep up, but I mean, Mr. Trump, I thought had started a social media site, and from what his friends and colleagues write to me, they're not getting very many people to.
No, he didn't. It wasn't a full site. It was sort of like this page that led you to another page. If that was what they did, that wasn't very well done. I will give them a mulligan on that one and time to reshape and regroup. But no, that wasn't the correct site. But this is and I'll give them a mulligan. Everybody deserves a mulligan. He's out of office for a little bit, but everybody in life, Ben Stein deserves a mulligan, and hopefully people like Peter Thiel, and we've been begging these people. And I want to ask you this question, Ben. You come from the generation of civic-minded people. You served our country. You did. You did in many ways. You were a speechwriter. You worked for the Federal Trade Commission.
Very briefly in the Navy. Very, 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 very briefly.
In the Navy. What did you do in the Navy?
Taught fucking geometry, because this was in the days before there were computers to calculate firing of naval cannon, and so we had to explain about how to calculate what size charge would be in the shell and what angle it should be at and what weight the shell should be to arrive at such and such a target at such and such a time. And believe me, it was very, very hard.
Remember how the other night we were discussing where would you want to be, a fly on the wall? That's where I would have been, a fly on the wall. Ben,
I didn't like it at all, and I think they sort of picked up the fact they didn't like it, and they kicked me out. They said, "Why would you be kicking me out?" And they said, "Well, because we see on your medical application that you suffer from asthma." And I said, "True enough, I do, but I expect that I will be out at sea, and I don't expect there to be any ragweed or horse poopy or whatever it is, or grass seed out at sea. So what's the problem?" And they said, "Well, we don't know, but we just have so many people wanting to be in the Naval ROTC that we're just kicking out anybody we can."
Isn't that great? Isn't that just another great example of why Ben's so great? He just randomly is like, "Yeah, I was in the Navy."
I know. I mean, I've known him for God knows how
I
long.
was in it very, very briefly. I didn't do anything the
You
slightest.
did it longer
bit
than you were a
dangerous.
shoe. You did it longer than you were a shoe
Yes.
salesman.
Yes, I didn't do anything at all dangerous, not even the slightest bit dangerous or risky. I have a relative who did do risky things, and my wife's family were all incredibly risky, brave,
Very,
unbelievably risky
very
people. Yeah, my wife's family are real starkers, as we Jews say. They're
true American heroes.
yes.
Ben, when you say you were a shoe salesman, was this like an Al Bundy Married with Children shoe salesman, or like door to door? What does that mean?
No, no, no. I was at a store called the Shoe Giant, and it was in Langley Park, Maryland.
Was it for people with big feet?
What?
Was
Yes,
it
there
with
were lots of people with big feet, exactly. And they were very nice, friendly people, incredibly friendly. It one of the greatest groups of people you'd ever want to meet in life is people wanting to buy shoes in Langley Park, Maryland. They're almost all African American, and they were incredibly friendly and nice. And I just had a great time doing it. And I really felt like crying when they made me leave.
You
Okay,
know
so-
real quick, you know someone somewhere saw Ferris Bueller, and in that scene they're like, I bought shoes from that dude.
I would imagine that happens a lot, but I want to say MD Mello told us swatting. It makes a call to the police that a robbery with guns is taking place, typically in a celebrity home. Police call out a SWAT team, but it's actually been done by gamers too. Gamers have sent SWAT teams to people's homes, and people have died because of that. And so that's what swatting is. It's referring to SWAT coming out to your homes. And on that note, if you just tuned in, you are listening to the fabulous world of Ben Stein, of where Ben's. It really is amazing, I got to tell you. And we're joined tonight by Rob Kendall from 93.1 BAM, WIBC,
Bam.
the president of Conservative Talk Radio, and of course, man of the world, Ben, Renaissance man. You truly are a Renaissance man, and a genius Renaissance man. But most importantly, before I forget, my mother's in the hospital tonight recovering from surgery.
Oh, bless her.
Let's all send out our well wishes, our prayers, and she said she might listen to the show. Ima, I pray you're listening with your headsets on, because they're coming to get you. I don't care what hospital you're in. You don't need to be listening to this out loud, or listen to it out loud and get arrested at the age of 73. But on that note, welcome back to the world according to Ben Stein. And I was asking you, you were brought up in civic duty. Your father served the country. He served the country on many levels. And you served the country on many levels. And right now, for instance, we're talking about, we live in the state of California, where the best candidate we could get for the governor is Caitlyn Jenner. We are left with Caitlyn Jenner to run. What happened, Ben, to people's fiduciary responsibility to ethics and to serve a higher power? What happened?
I don't know, but it's a bad situation, and somehow I think it's largely confined to California, because I would say 95% of my emails are from Republicans running for various offices, and they seem to have all had military backgrounds and have a lot of experience either in military or police or both, and they're willing to have still more experience with risk to life and limb. When the idea came to be dominant, the smart thing to do is stay out of the military, make as much money as you can, and then run for office. I don't know when that came about, but it definitely has come about. I don't know where it came from.
Do you think lobbying, I mean, do you just think the swamp is, I mean, how could we not get it? And let's not forget, the greatest governor of California was a famous actor. Let's not forget that, who taught himself, who's studious, who learned. We have some really famous conservative actors out here. They had asked Ben for a while to be governor, Rob, if you were unaware of that. Ben chose not to. But we have people like Kelsey Grammer. We have people like Tim Allen. We have, we have people like Gary Sinise. Perfect example of a guy like Gary Sinise.
Great. I love him.
Why would there not be a monster push for Gary Sinise to
I don't
run
know.
for governor?
I do not know. I would go door to door for him cheerfully.
So would I, Rob. I just thought of that. That's great. Gary Sinise running for governor.
Well, we look at California with amazement because you think about that state, and like you said, the fact that Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan both came out of California, and by comparative historical standards, the rapid descent left. Now, look, and you guys know this better than I do, but I anticipate a lot of what's happened is people with common sense are getting the hell out of there, and because they see what's happening and they don't want to deal with it, and so all you're left with are present company excluded, radical left crazy people.
But it's a beautiful state, Ben, that could be saved, run by the right people. We're on a bad track. That's the reality. We have a homeless epidemic that's out of control. We have the school board union is out of control. And I really truly believe, Ben, business owners here are tired of this stuff. Nobody wants to go clean up their business in the morning and have to sweep hypodermics and literal crap from in front of their property. They just need a person that has strength and power to start running for governor.
Well, we're not going to get it for a good long while. We've just been beaten up and beaten by the media. Every time you turn on the media, there's some story about some conservative doing some horrible racist thing. And so it's getting to the point where I will tell you the interesting point it's gotten to. I go to a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful grocery store almost every day. It's called Pavilions. And I always say, God bless America, as I'm leaving, handing them my credit card. And they used to almost always say, God bless America, right back to me. Rarely do they do that now. Why? I do not know. I just don't know. Rob, what happens in the great Midwest in Booth?
Well, Rob's constantly complaining about the governor, and it's a great point, Rob. It's an oligarchy.
If you go up to your checker at the grocery store, if you do your own shopping, and you say, and you end the transaction, thank you very much, God bless America, what do they say back to you, or do they not say anything?
Well, Ben, I shop at Walmart, and they have the self-checkout there, so I only have myself to entertain when I do that. And so I always tell myself, God bless America, and I say it right back to myself.
I don't know how I've never been able to figure out how self-checkout works. And someday I hope maybe you'll come out to LA and show me.
Absolutely. Now, Ben, I do have a question. Like, there's famous people everywhere where you're at. So, like, I'm pondering if I'm working at a grocery store and I see Ben Stein, I'm going to be like freaking out. Oh my gosh, Ben Stein is buying groceries. But is that like even a big deal out there because there's famous people everywhere? Do they acknowledge famous people at the store?
They acknowledge Ben Stein. I can attest to this.
They acknowledge each other. I know that just a few days ago, I was pulling out of my space, and Jay Leno was pulling out of the space right next to me. And he was very, very friendly, and we were all friendly to each other. And everybody was being pretty damn friendly.
But like for the ordinary people, like the people that work at the grocery store, they're like, oh my gosh, it's the guy from Ferris Bueller. Like, are they just like, here you go, here's your groceries, have a nice day?
No, they're much nicer than that. They're much nicer. But I go there almost every day. I'm an avid grocery shopper, so it's not really unusual for me to be there. They're quite used to seeing me there. At every counter, they're used to seeing me.
And by the way, it's a fanboy.
I can tell you the price of almost anything at the meat counter. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Fanboy James Corden, thank you for chiming in, Rob Kendall. But somebody brought up in the chat something very interesting. And since I am from this place, I could tell you it's very different. New York has always been, obviously California has been corrupted, but New York has never had the governors that California has had. New York has never had the leadership. And somehow it's managed until Rudy Giuliani. New York for what, Ben, 30 years was an absolute. What?
I wouldn't say that. I went to college in New York and I thought it was great. I mean,
I said for 30 years. When you went to college, that's sort of.
I went to college from 62 to 66.
Okay, so from the 70s and the 80s, we know New York hit a major
horrible.
Right. So it was Democrat run. Yeah, Ben's obviously very familiar with Tammany Hall, but the governors were terrible, the mayors were terrible, everybody, Rob, except for the senators, oddly enough. They had two great senators in D'Amato and Moynihan from separate parties who were good people who who went to, do their, but as far as Cuomo's father being the governor, as far as Koch and Dinkins, just, and I don't remember who was before Koch, just absolute atrocities. California really was run well. That's the shame of this state, is that we're left with, American psycho Gavin Newsom and Caitlyn Jenner running against him. I mean, what the hell has gone wrong?
That is a really, really good question. Rob, if you can answer it, I'd love to hear it.
Well, no, I was just going to say there was a great documentary I was watching a couple days ago about the Son of Sam on, I think it was on Netflix. And it did put in perspective at that time in the late 70s, just what a terrible shape New York as a collective was in. Now, the question I have is, if you can't beat Gavin Newsom after he destroyed that state, I mean, for an entire year, just completely shut everything down. It's not even liberal or conservative policies. The guy completely just destroyed lives for an entire year. How can you not beat that guy?
Well, the amazing thing is you can't beat him because the media will be there calling you a fascist and a racist and saying you're doing gay baiting and say you're doing horrible things to LGBTQ people. And they will ruin your chance of winning them. They'll say you're a bully and a thug, and hardly anyone will speak up for you.
But Ben, you often bring up something that's extremely important. First of all, a lot of it's apathy. But the second thing, Ben, is that you've spoken about what's your plan. If you have a voice, and I'm not talking about Cox who's running or Caitlyn Jenner, I'm saying if you have a powerful person that has an agenda and can actually outline that agenda, you could get the apathetic out. Reagan did it, Nixon did it. They had courage. They were well versed in what they were speaking about. Two very, very intelligent people. And obviously Nixon being a little, obviously a sheer genius, Ben. But that's really what's missing, Ben, is what you constantly talk about. What is your roadmap to get us out of this hellhole?
Well, first of all, define what the hellhole is. What to you, who are my neighbor here in Southern California, what do you see as the hellhole? Because right around here where I live,
yeah, Ben, excluding Beverly Hills. With this, and I've brought this up before, excluding your little neighborhood, LA is one big tent or RV camp in so many areas. It looks like RV City via 1972 in the Val. Okay, people living in RVs, Ben. People, I mean, there's garbage on the street, feces every morning in tons of areas. And it's wild and it's scary. I mean, and here's the issue that I don't get. Women are the ones that should be petrified of the homeless epidemic. And it always goes to show you, people, you've brought up, people never vote their own interest. And it's a fascinating thing, Ben.
Well, I think what I said specifically was the Jews don't
Jews, I know, but I took it even one step further. You have people constantly in states that bitch and moan, but don't vote their own interest. And
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. But by the way, if I may respectfully say, I love you, and I love what's the name of our friend on Fox who's always dumping on LA. I forget his name, but great.
Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson. LA really, when I get in my car and go out the door of the garage and go down the street and go through various towns and communities, on my way out to our house in Malibu.
Oh, so Ben, when you pass no, hold on a second. So when you pass the vet or the federal building, you see tons.
Horrible.
So what are you talking about? That's literally devastating and Rob, just to put it in perspective, there's a massive cemetery there. Just a massive cemetery on one of our most famous streets, what is that, San Vicente? Wilshire Boulevard.
Intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and San Vicente.
And San Vicente, Rob. And it literally, it's horrifying. You have American flags over tents. I mean, hundreds of them every day. And it's really a pox on, it's terrifying, man. And it's frightening.
What's going on? Let's back up about that. We're going to talk about how we're going to solve that problem How do we solve that problem?
Can I?
I'm under the impression that those people are given the opportunity to live in homeless shelters and they turn it down.
Remember how I told you I wanted to tell me a story the other night, and if we forgot, I said before the show, remind me to tell you of a heartbreaking story, and I've shared it on the air before, but I will share it in a second. If you just tuned in, you are listening to The World According to That Man, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. We are joined tonight as like many times over, and it's greatly appreciated by Rob Kendall from the president of 93.1 BAM, conservative talk at its best, Rob Kendall. And of course, icon and iconoclast, Benjamin Jeremy Stein. So here's the huge problem that nobody wants to talk about. We've been taught and preached to that drug addiction and alcoholism is not the biggest reason for homelessness. We've been lied to, right? So it's mental illness, and it's mental illness which obviously take into account includes addiction. But Ben, this is a true story. I used to live pretty much around here, but every night I would walk outside and to smoke or something, and I would see this homeless man with a dog, and it would break my heart.
Me.
Sorry?
Was it me?
No, it wasn't you. And I'm talking, Rob, where I live in the Valley, it gets to about 110 in the summertime, and it gets boiling hot. And I would walk up to him, and we were talking, and he was applying. He needed to find a place for him and his dog to live, and I got that. I respected that, and I gave him a few bucks or whatever I could, and I bought him dog food for his dog and something for him. And this happened a lot. And then one day he tells me, Ben and Rob, that he got a place that allowed his dog. And I was like, that's amazing. Good for you. And so what would you think? I would not expect to see him again. And the next or 2 days later, I'm walking and I see him sleeping there again. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, the problem with the new place they're allowing me to live, and I'm not, it's heart-rendering, as somebody would say.
My wonderful wife, the goddess of goddesses.
The goddess of goddesses would say, the methadone clinic, he couldn't make it to the methadone clinic on time from the place that was given to him by the state of California for him and his dog to live. That's why he couldn't move in, Ben, to that facility. So there you are. That was anecdotal data, to be sure.
Very, very sad, though, but very, very, we have a lot of crazy people in this town. We have a lot of crazy people everywhere. I don't know what to tell you about that. I mean, there's a very serious problem of mental illness in California and all over the country and all over the world. There's a very, very serious problem of mental illness. I don't know what else to say. It's just a really, really sad situation. There's too fucking many mentally ill people. It's really sad for them. It's really sad for everybody. It's really, really, really sad.
Yeah, and Rob, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, look, downtown Indianapolis has had this problem, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the air. And the problem is they try to treat all homelessness like with a blanket, right? And you can't do that because there's layers to it. And I'm sure your issue is much the same there as ours is here. There's several different types of homeless people. There are people who are legitimately homeless, right? You need to figure out, something to do with them, a place for them to stay. But then there are panhandlers. There are people who, if you offered them a home, they will not take it because they're making money off being out there pestering people for money. So you have to deal with them different. Those are people you got to get out of the way, right? Because they can work, they could work, they just don't want to. The third one is what we refer to as drugged out zombie guy. And that person is a real threat, not only to himself, but all the people around him. And the problem is government tries to treat a lot of these people with an entire blanket, one approach, one size fits all. And that doesn't work because they all need to be treated differently.
Well, I keep thinking this is I don't know how you solve that problem. And I don't know why in 1958, a year I remember very, very well, why in 1958 we didn't have this problem. I mean, I lived in a nice neighborhood, nothing even to be compared with Beverly Hills, but a nice neighborhood, a damn nice neighborhood, really, really nice neighborhood. And we did not have this problem. I grew up in a town called Silver Spring, Maryland, which is now a very, very large suburb of Washington, D.C. We didn't have this problem at all. What happened to create this problem? I don't know. But something happened now. A lot, when I go east, I go to the eastern shore of Chesapeake Bay. It's an incredibly beautiful area. I don't see any homeless there. I don't know where they are. I mean, they must be somewhere. I don't see them anywhere. Where are they? Where
Well,
are you?
since we both belong to a spiritual program that teaches us that our malady is a spiritually based malady, I think the loss of spirituality, the loss of religion in our country, the loss of a higher power, Ben, has a lot to do with this stuff. I could be wrong, but the lack of a higher power or God has a lot to do
Well,
with
that
where
has
we are.
something to do with it. I mean, has there really been a counter revolution against God and against worship of God? That is possible. That's
Yes, there is.
possible.
There are actual amazing statistics how the people that believed in your generation in religion and in God and in organized religion, how down it is, how the major percentage down. If somebody in the Google chat, in the YouTube chat wants to look at that exact number, please do. But there is a very significant number.
A big
So you're saying that for some reason, which we do not know, we don't know the reason, but for some reason, there's been a gigantic drop off in the number of people who believe in God as a moving spiritual presence in his or her life.
Yes, completely so. And I think in your generation, people gave up for football. You know, football Sunday was not as popular as it is now. You had a lot more people attending church because they were poked and prodded, probably, but they did it as a family affair, Rob, I would imagine. And you being Rob, a semi-religious man, I would imagine. Um, it, it's listen, you're asking for what's changed. I'm giving you an example of what's changed.
No, sir, yes, sir. What I wasn't asking you for what's changed. I was asking you for why did it change? Why did people stop going to church and instead start watching football on TV? Why did people stop believing that God was a moving presence in their lives? And yet, I do read that evangelism and a kind of basic Protestantism are a very powerful force in American life, and I
I
don't
have
doubt
a
that
question
too.
for you on this, Ben. I'll get to you after Rob goes.
Well, we talked about this quite a bit on the show that look, America is the big bang, right, of government, right? It only will happen once in human history. And the idea that if you think all those incredibly brave and brilliant people got together at the same time, at the same place, all the things that had to go right for the creation of this country as it relates to the Revolutionary War and then the foundation immediately afterwards, that was not inspired by man, right? There's no way man pulled that off on his own. If you understand the foundation of this country and you don't believe in some form of a higher being, then I feel bad for you.
All right, but okay,
So I was going
fine.
to ask you a few questions, Ben. I was going to ask you a few
Well, can
questions. You
I
gave
ask
us.
Rob, why did that happen? I agree that it happened. I agree that it happened. Why did it happen?
Why did what happen, Ben?
Why did it happen that my generation or the one before mine, which really did believe there was a God as a moving real presence on earth, stopped believing in that, stopped believing God was a moving real presence in life? I mean, I have in my office here a stereo where I play the disc of a very wonderful musical from the very early 50s called Guys and Dolls. It has a lot of reference to religion and to going to football games instead of football. Football, I guess any other sport. Why it is people stopped going to religious events and started going and watching TV. Why did that happen?
Okay,
Why,
so here's
why,
my
why?
question. Here's my question to you now. Ben, if you need to turn on the air conditioning and get a little air, please do.
Okay,
Um,
thank you.
but what I was going to say to you is, what was the divorce rate in your era, Ben?
I don't know, but amazingly, it has changed, but not very much. It has changed, but not very much. I mean,
What was
it's a very that's part of it. But why would that have changed? What was it about Americans that made them want to change their lives so much? I mean, life in the 50s because I'm much, much older than either of you two. But I will tell you, life in the 50s seemed to me to be pretty good.
Rob, do you have an answer for him?
Well, I think a lot of it, and I could be wrong. Ben's a much greater historian than I am, but religion.
I'm just a lot older than you.
Religion is the power of the individual, right? A belief in a higher being means not a belief in government, that you look to something above man. And I think that in many ways enraged a whole lot of big government people, because to them there is nothing greater than the state, there is nothing greater than the government. And I think society, they have done a great job in society of brainwashing people into thinking that if you believe in some sort of higher power, that you're a less than, that you're a kook, that you're a crazy. I don't know about you guys, but the older I get, the more and more certain I become, and I was pretty certain when I was younger, but the more and more certain I become that there absolutely is a higher power, and we are all here for a reason.
I couldn't agree with you more. But Bren, I think Mark Kozlowski in the chat brings up the best point. I think he answers the question stone cold. It's the university systems. You have decades of people being indoctrinated that God doesn't, that they're questioning God, questioning church, questioning religion, questioning all these things, and you have a new generation that came out that grew up listening to their professors that it wasn't important.
Well, if I may say so, since I'm the only one on this very small but wonderful screen at this moment who did go to school in that generation, we did not have professors brainwashing us about leftism.
That's my point. That's his point. That's Mark's point. After the next generations, the indoctrination really started to happen.
Of that, I don't know, because I wasn't there, but I was teaching then, and I certainly was not indoctrinating them to believe in atheism.
Okay, but you're using yourself as anecdotal data. We're talking about the Chomskys of the world. We're talking about all of these liberal.
That's absolutely true. That is absolutely true, and there had been a revolution in students' attitudes. In many ways, there's no doubt about that. It is done.
Yeah. It's I don't know what it's like. You have great stories about ending Yom Kippur. I mean, if you want to get some great stories, Rob, from Ben, it's who he broke fast with on Yom Kippur, and the powerhouse of the Washington establishment that was at these events, right? You did it with the crystals, right?
Well, more important with sapphire.
It's just nuts. But my point being is, even that, I grew up, there was nothing more sacred than the Sabbath. There was something comforting to it. Rob, I'm sure after church, you guys gather somewhere, you guys eat together sometimes. You were raised in that. We have a generation, Ben, that doesn't have that group gathering with their families.
Well, I don't remember every detail of that. What I do remember was that I graduated from college in '66, and I started teaching college in about '71, which was about 5 years later. And the kids had changed fantastically between '66 and '71. There was much freer attitudes about sex, and much freer attitudes about drugs, much freer attitudes about using what we would have called unacceptable curse words in class. That had definitely happened. And I did see some of that happening at Yale. I remember I was quite shocked when I went to Yale and found that teachers felt free to use four-letter words in class, which I would never have imagined would be true at Yale, but it was. So something had definitely happened. But what was it? What was it? I think, if I had to back into it, I would say it had to do with the Vietnam War. People were so unhappy with Vietnam War, so brainwashed by the communist machinery of propaganda that they began to think everything that went wrong was pushed in that direction by the U.S. government in order to further its war plans.
That's all right, Rob.
Well, I was just going to say, for the record, you can hit a Sunday morning church service and still be home in time, plenty of time, for kickoff at 1 p.m. for the NFL games. So let's just be very clear. It's not an either or thing here. But But
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Rob, you should market that. That would be great.
That's a very, very good point.
Yeah.
Very, very
The
good point.
church where you could still make football.
I love it. It's very, very good. I love it.
But when I owned my radio station down in North Carolina, we used to run 2 Sunday services as part of that. It was a Baptist and a Methodist, and we'd run them back to back. And so a lot of my Sundays were spent listening to those services. And man, there was always just such a peace. And I just always remember thinking, those people in those services probably feel so good walking out of there. And I'm sitting there in my little studio listening to this on the radio. And I always just think, you always just feel so much better when you leave church. How can you not want to feel that way all the time?
Well, but I feel the same way about Alcoholics Anonymous. I feel that way when I leave a meeting of AA. I feel so much better, and I don't understand why people don't want to do that every day. I feel dramatically, incomparably, insanely better. I don't know why people don't want to do that every day.
Yeah, Ben wrote one of the most brilliant pieces, of his many brilliant pieces, because we used to go to this meeting every day at noon at this place called the Key Club, Rob, in Hollywood. And it was a big club. It was a massive club, but every noon we'd have a meeting there. And Ben could attest to this. You probably had the greatest rock band in the world there at this, if you combined all the people there. And of course you had Ben Stein. And Ben wrote a piece about every day finding God at noon at a club. And I just thought it was such a beautiful, remarkable a piece. But Ben, somebody brings up.
God bless you. I like being praised. Thank you very much.
And Rob, luscious locks. But somebody brought up a great point. I grew up in the 80s. Rob, you grew up a little bit after me. Ben, I grew up in a time where there were, and I was talking with my friend about this the other day, where movies in the 80s were real, there were movies that were geared towards my age. Right, you had movies where boys and girls could explore. They could, you had the Indiana Jones, you had Star Wars, you had the Goonies. You had these family-friendly movies, family-friendly TV shows. That I don't remember them talking about sex. I don't remember them talking about certain things, Rob or Ben. It was never brought to the table. The Goonies or the Princess Bride or these and I think entertainment has really steered us in many ways off the cliff. I mean, your game show, Ben, when it was on, which people loved, every college.
God bless you. Thank you. It's really.
And every college kid watched your game show. We were in a doctorate office one time, and somebody said to Ben, Rob, your game show got me through college. And it was a beautiful, nice,
you're very kind
game show. And there are quite a few. There are some of those that are still exist. But now everything is like, can you make it like through some crazy ass hole? And can you know what I mean? It's like, they're nuts. I mean, we've gone absolutely nuts, Rob.
But it's why nostalgia sells, right? Because people yearn for better times. And it's why those shows like, whether it's Golden Girls or Family Ties or whatever, live on forever and probably do better ratings than a lot of the newer shows, because people yearn for when things were just better and television was just better back then.
It was much, much better, incomparably, incalculably, mind-bogglingly better.
And as you brought up, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I know we got into the last time I was here, but I would put the movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles up against any movie that's been made in the past 10 years. Any movie, period. It's just a better movie. Yeah, exactly. And that's why Ferris Bueller remained so popular. I've seen a ton of articles written about the 35th anniversary of Ferris Bueller here recently, because people know that was a better product and they yearn to have it again.
Ben, he's actually raising a great point. He always does. Yeah, he's Rob Kendall with the great luscious locks. But he raises a great point. If you ever notice when you watch movie trailers, Rob or Ben, they have a lot of music from the 80s, right? It's never like a 90s grunge soundtrack or a Miley song. It's rock from the 80s, because there was, people crave nostalgia, but Hollywood won't give people what they crave. And they're willing to lose money. They're willing to have nobody, Ben, watch their award shows for the sake of woke, for the sake of teaching us lessons. Movies when we were kids or growing up weren't lessons. I didn't walk away from the A-Team going, wow, I got a lesson tonight. The lesson, or I didn't walk necessarily away from MacGyver or all that, which Ben appeared on, and all these different shows. I wasn't walking, even though I watched it years later, it was a little woke MacGyver, but nonetheless, I walked away happy. And I don't see people walking away happy from stuff they're watching, Ben.
They're not walking away happy at all. And I think your point is well taken. Well, I think the genius of my very, very good friend Norman Lear, who has been like a prince to me in the time since I've been in Hollywood, was that he could make you watch a show that made you laugh out loud, literally horse laugh, guffaw out loud, and also taught you something morally uplifting. Yes, Norman is extremely left-wing, extremely, but he is uplifting, and he's not a saboteur of moral values. He is uplifting in terms of moral values. That is largely missing in America today.
And Judah, I think a big part of it too is we weren't exposed to a lot of these celebrities as people, right? Like you didn't know what Michael J. Fox politics or Michael Gross's politics were, or the cast of Alf, what their politics were.
I don't even have any idea who Michael Gross is.
The
he
dad
was the
on Family
father.
Ties.
He was the father on Family Ties.
Or Meredith Baxter Birney, or whoever, right? Like there was this illusion and allure, and Ben can speak to this because he was in Hollywood in the 80s, that it was kind of like, how do they do this? How they live in this magical world, and you saw them once a week and you weren't exposed to them other than that, and you could enjoy their product for what it was. They were talented people making you be entertained.
I miss it very, very, very much. Very much.
And that's why and by the way, somebody brought up, just so I don't forget, that you could watch the George Wallace movie, Set in the Woods on Fire on
That
YouTube.
is the best documentary, except for movies about World War II. That's the best documentary I've ever seen. It's incredible.
And you can watch it on YouTube.
It's a story of such moral uplift. It's incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Judah, can I tell a true story about Ben? When I was a kid, obviously I knew Ben from the movies, and the two big ones were Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and Ferris Bueller. And then I remember, Ben, how long did When Ben Stein's Money run? Do you remember the years?
It ran for I think 6 seasons, and I think it was from 94 to 2000 or 95 to 2000. I know we made not exactly 1,000, but close to 1,000 episodes.
Okay, so I remember watching all the When Ben Stein's Money, and I can remember in junior high, and my dad is watching this right now, and I'm sure he won't remember this, but my dad telling me that Ben Stein was involved in politics because I was watching the guy from Ferris Bueller and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and I had no idea, Ben, until I was in probably junior high, that Ben was involved in politics, and he was telling me, you worked for Nixon and you were on the various shows and everything. So that's even how closed Hollywood was back then, that some stupid little kid didn't even know Ben was in politics. And that
you're such a good friend. I'm really, really touched. I was in politics in a very, very, very trivial way, and I, as people always say to me, people come to me at the pavilions all the time and say, "Are you an actor?" And I always say, "Not a very good one, but I am an actor."
It's so funny because it reminds me of a story. I have a friend whose father he was on the set of Zorro and the Gay Blade, and this kid walked up to him and said to his father, "Are you an actor?" And he said, "No, I'm a star." And and then the kid walked up to the other actor and he said, "Are you a star?" And he says, "No, I'm an actor." But Ben, don't kid yourself. You were tremendous in the Wonder Years. You were tremendous. But I want to get to the final topic of tonight, and because it's so difficult to thread the needle of especially Rob, you go to church, Ben and I go to 12-step meetings, and we go to other things for spirituality. But this living, you can't live in resentment, and you have to sort of forgive. And we are living in really trying times, Ben Stein, as you have people like Ilhan Omar, who are raging anti-Semites, just absolute raging anti-Semites, essentially want us dead. Tweeted a a militant Muslim video for a Muslim group the other day that commits atrocities. She retweeted this, and she's all in on her anti-Semitism ban. So how do you forgive that? That's my question to you. How do you forgive that? How do you forgive? And this is a person you're one of the people you're closest to brought down your former boss in Carl Bernstein, and you guys are still and you still have a connection and care about that person. So how do you do it?
I think Ilhan Omar is a spiritually sick person. As we say in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, these people are spiritually sick. They're not, and they're really sick. As if they had pneumonia or tuberculosis, they're seriously sick. And I think that is true of people who are wild anti-Semites and who are lining themselves up with people who wanted to commit a second Holocaust in an afternoon, which is the motto of the Hamas and of the Iranian National Guard, whatever it's called, the National Guard. That if you line yourself up with them, you are lining yourself up with the devil, and you do not need to be forgiven by me, but the act of forgiveness has to be done by somebody, and these people are terribly, terribly, terribly sick people, terribly, terribly, terribly sick.
Maybe that's, Rob, what's changed too, is we've lost empathy. One of Ben's favorite words, we've lost the ability to be empathetic towards other people's needs. I'm not going to blame one side or another because I think everybody's to blame for this. I in my humble opinion, but Rob, we've lost a certain amount of empathy.
It is
a large chunk of empathy.
You're right, but there also was a time too that regardless of political party or affiliation, the idea that you put America first and America above all else was not a bad thing. It wasn't a foreign concept. You weren't a bad person. In fact, that was expected of you. And Democrats and Republicans could fight around the margins on tax rates and things of that nature, size of government, but everybody loved America and knew we were the good guys. And there's a whole swath of people, including many in government, who don't believe America's the good guy anymore.
Oh, absolutely. And in the media especially, I mean, it's astonishing. I rarely watch MSNBC or CNN, but sometimes while flipping through the channels, I will watch them for a while. It is amazing how little love these media powerhouses have for this great, great country. It's terrifying that the media powerhouses that come out of this great country don't understand it as the greatest creation of mankind.
I think that's so important what you're saying, and it goes back to what we were talking about the whole time. What's changed? All of our parents taught us for love of country.
Oh boy! And how?
My mom was very insistent on love of country and very grateful for what this country did for Israel and how they helped Israel. But she loves this country. I mean, she's first generation, and she saw what this country afforded her and her family. And I bring this up because, you know, it is very interesting that my mom is, I know she's listening to the show. We were on this family massive WhatsApp text strand, you know, finding out about how she's doing. And my kudos to my sister for being an amazing person and standing up and being able to take her and be there at the hospital and keeping us all in the loop. But how many families have that anymore, Ben?
Yeah, very few, but you have to make it your own responsibility to make it happen in your life. I know when my father was in the hospital for his final illness, the people who made Windman Science money were kind enough to let me take off about 7 or 8 weeks and just sit with him in the hospital day after day, just holding his hand and asking him questions about his youth and about his childhood and about the federal budget deficit. At that point, I believe the president was President Clinton, and there were many, many debates about bonds. And even in his final hours on this planet, he was writing notes, and I still have the notes in my closet. They're bloodstains, notes about what he thought the optimal interest rate should be. And they're bloodstained because his brain was working like a madman's perfervid brain, even as he was dripping blood at the end of his life. And because he was thinking all the damn time, And I was thinking, thank you, God, you gave me this unbelievably wonderful man as my father. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
And on that note, I want to say, Rob, I want to tell you it's the coolest story. And I know I exaggerated a little bit, but it was during the 73 war, and the State Department wasn't helping Israel.
Of course.
And every day, Herbert Stein and a few other Jews in the a few other powerful Jews in the administration would knock on RN's door and beg him. And
Leonard
beg
Garment,
him.
especially.
Sorry?
Leonard Garment, especially.
And they would beg, I just put this image in your head of Herbert Stein, who looked a little bit like Henry Kissinger, who served this country on so many levels proud, every day would go on Richard Nixon's door. And if not for Richard Nixon sending arms, and I attribute that to Ben's father. I do. I attribute.
There were lots of other people doing it, but my father was very, very happy to do it. He loved it.
You know what?
Loved America. My father would rip my head off my body if he thought I didn't love America.
Okay, and let me tell you this one final story, just because Rob, this is what the only, Ben's not telling this. Bill Clinton was in the White House, and Shimon Peres was there, and Ben's father was walking by, and Shimon Peres walked up to Ben's father and gave him a huge hug. And state me if I'm saying this incorrectly. And Bill Clinton said, like, what did you, who, you know, what? And Shimon Peres said, this man saved Israel's economy. This man saved Israel. That's who Ben Stein's father is. And you know,
God bless you. You bring tears to my eyes. God bless you. God bless you.
I bring chills to myself and almost tears to my eye. And again, programming note: we will not be here Thursday night. We'll be here Friday night instead. Ben is traveling, so we'll be here Friday night instead. I want to remind everybody to download the podcast. Please keep downloading that podcast and give it the 5-star reviews and those pithy comments to my mom in the hospital. You rock. You are the family stone. If that made any sense. But Rob, I love having you on. You're truly an American. You're becoming an American icon. And how do people find you?
Hey, 93.1 WIBC, WIBC.com. Bam. Weekdays 9 to noon. And to Judah's mom, we hope you get feeling better.
Thank you all for your well wishes. And of course, you can find Benjamin Jeremy Stein at spectator.org. And please, they need sometimes donations. Give what you can, even if it's $5 or $6 or $10 or $1. Donate to spectator.org. It's some of the best writers in the business, but of course, it's got Ben Stein's daily diaries and pieces that only Ben Stein has enough guts to write. You could also find them on Parler at Ben Stein and our newsletter, benstein.substack.com. Ben, we salute you. If you will sing us out, sir.
I'm going to try to do this a little better than I did it last time. I walk in the garden alone while the dew is still on the roses, and the voice I hear as I wander there, the Son of God discloses, and he walks with me and he talks with me. And he tells me I am his own, and the joy we share as we tarry there, none other has ever known. That's my big mama, my wife's grandmother.
That was amazing, Ben. That was your best one yet. And we will see everybody Friday night. Be safe. God bless you. Until then, have a great night, everybody.